who needs sound effects when you've got the real thing? You know what? I spend a lot of time talking about sustainability. I'm a sustainability officer for my local government, and so I get really excited when I find a brand that cares so much about being environmentally and socially responsible as this one does. I'm also really interested in monitoring water quality in waterways, so I'm a little bit of a science nerd too. So imagine how excited I was when I found a notebook brand that was sustainable because it had recycled paper, and it also had a huge range of science-themed covers. Hi, I'm Ruby from the Useful Journal. Like this video and subscribe to my channel to help you make your choice about your next notebook. Today I'm reviewing a Cognitive Surplus 100% recycled dot grid notebook. I will tell you a bit about the company and their products, their approach to environmental and social responsibility, and then I suppose I'd better talk about the journal itself, the packaging, the construction of the journal, the paper, and my pen test. Cognitive Surplus is based in Oregon in the USA. The recycled paper is milled in Japan and assembled responsibly into notebooks in China. We'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. The huge range of Cognitive Surplus products, including their notebooks, can be bought online through their American or their European shop fronts, and they also have a bricks and mortar store in Redmond, Oregon. I'm going to limit my discussion today specifically to two ranges of notebooks that are marked with a dot grid. That will be the Hypothesis range, which is a hardcover. It's 7 by 9 inches, so it's kind of in between an A5 and a B5 size, and it has 192 pages. And I'll also be talking about the Experiment range, which is a soft cover notebook with 112 pages, and it is 6.75 inches by 9 inches. You might also look for the Case Study range of notebooks. These are A6 size. Some of them have dot grid. I managed to land one of those as well. They have a huge range of other notebooks, mostly with lines or grid, but there's one or two that have a mixture. There's some that have a dotted line, which is lines that are 7 millimeters apart, and then along that line is a 7 millimeter dot. So that would work pretty much the same way, but give you a bit more guidance when you're writing. There's various sizes, an endless array of covers in soft cover and in hard cover, some with elastic closures and some without. They even now have a dark matter notebook, which is black paper and comes marked with a dot grid on one page and then a lined marking on the page opposite. And it's still recycled. The Experiment notebook is about $16 US, which comes out at 14 cents per page, which is still cheaper than art quality notebooks, even though recycled paper is more expensive to produce. The hardcover version, the Hypothesis notebook, is $25 US, and that comes out at 13 cents a page. The reason it's cheaper is because it has more pages in the journal. I did lose my unboxing video when my computer got a bath, but Cognitive Surplus don't wrap their products. If you do get one, that is really definitely an exception to the rule rather than standard. Even their washi tape has no plastic wrap. Cognitive Surplus have made a huge effort to avoid single-use plastics where they can, and they've even been investigating how to replace the pallet wrap, the plastic pallet wrap that stops boxes falling off the pallets. They haven't found one yet, but they're trying, and for the moment they're sending all their plastic pallet wrap off to get recycled. So they're still doing something with it, but they're trying to avoid using it altogether. Let's talk a bit more about their environmental efforts. I think Cognitive Surplus have by far the most outstanding approach to being environmentally and socially responsible of pretty much any brand I have tried. There's other brands trying, but they haven't really hit this level. For starters, their journals have 100% post-consumer waste recycled paper. This means that the paper has been recycled from used, say, office paper, and because it's being used, there's more likely to be impurities in the paper, which you might see as little flecks or dots, or sometimes bigger marks in some recycled papers. Recycling from post-consumer waste is eons harder, so therefore it's just so much more commendable that they've gone to so much effort to find a decent quality paper for their notebooks. Cognitive Surplus haven't stopped their efforts just at recycled paper. Each year they do an energy audit of their warehouses to see where they can improve their energy efficiency. They've replaced all their lighting with LED lighting. They've considered their heating and cooling, and they've even considered the products they use in their kitchens. Their environmental efforts basically poop all over a lot of other brands. Moving on to social responsibility, and Cognitive Surplus is a minority woman-owned business, and they also employ a lot of people with disabilities. So in 2022, they reported that 30% of their staff had a disability. And that means that they've got to modify processes in their workplace, they've got to modify equipment, and just it costs the business money. So it's really commendable that they do that and provide a workplace where disabled people can feel comfortable and included. As I mentioned earlier, while the paper is milled in Japan, it is then sent to China to be responsibly assembled. I did contact Cognitive Surplus about this because they use this responsibly assembled label a lot on their products. Let's have a look at the actual notebook. They're original, they're all science themed, and I think they're ultra cool. Both the soft cover and the hardcover notebooks that have dot grid don't have any closure or pockets or bookmark ribbons or pen loop. If you really need some of these inclusions, the hardcover version that has the dotted lines that I talked about does come with an elastic closure and a pocket. And for some reason, my little hardcover case study notebook, the A6 one, does have a ribbon in it. So it seems to be really varied depending on the notebook. So if you really care about some of these inclusions, then just hunt through their range and see if you can find one that has the bit that you want. The dot grid journals have rounded corners and plain edges to the paper. My softcover notebook only has 112 pages and doesn't have any extra features, so it is pretty light. The hardcover notebook is actually pretty light too, and that's probably because of the 80 GSM paper. Getting on to the construction of the notebook, the sewn perfect binding in this notebook allows it to lay flat when it's opened. I do have my mini hardcover A6 notebook from Cognitive Surplus, and that one doesn't lay flat, but I do believe from the videos I've seen that the larger hardcover notebook does lay flat. In this 112-page journal, there are only 4 signatures. The end papers are glued quite away from the spine, and conversely they could almost have done with a little more glue at 2 of the joins between the signatures because they're a touch gappy. My A6 size case study range notebook has a normal sewn book binding and doesn't have this glue problem at all. The binding is spot on. I'm pretty confident that they'll be sturdy enough to cope with whatever I throw at them. Apart from the dot grid, markings are restricted to the inside, front and back covers. The inside front cover has an owner page and branding, and the back cover has some details about the notebook. Also noteworthy is the scientific illustrations on the inside covers. In my experiment notebook, there are 30 dots across the page and 40 down the page. The dots at the centre are almost too close to the centre to be usable though. The dots are a very pale grey, but still just snuck into the average rating for dot darkness. They're very small though, so I do find them a bit hard to follow across the page. Alignment of the lines of dots across double page spreads is pretty much perfect. The dots are a reasonably consistent 5mm from all edges of the page. Continuing my recent run of bad luck, the dots are not 5mm apart. Rather, they are 5.5 centimetres for 10 dot grid squares. So you're gaining 5mm every 10 boxes. I'll just have to make my own grid guide again. I checked the A6 case study notebook and that one had a perfect 5mm dot grid. Why can they get it right with one and not with the other? It's so frustrating. As I've said a few times now, the paper is 100% post-consumer waste recycled paper. It is 80 GSM, so it's on the lighter weight side, and the colour is a greyish ivory, typical of recycled papers. What I'm really pleased about is there are hardly any imperfections, just the very occasional fleck in the paper. It's reasonably smooth, so it actually felt okay to write on with a fountain pen. But as you'll see, when I talk about ghosting and bleeding, there is limitations on the type of pens you can use on this paper. The open grain of the paper really shows up in the wet on wet watercolour test, where you can see spots once it's dried. And the Tombow dual brush pens also had a spotty finish. There was a moderate amount of page wrinkle associated with watercolours. So the overall message here really is just don't use too much water, too much wet ink. Because the paper is a bit more porous, the pens dried super quickly. I think it only took about 3 seconds to dry. And then when you write with a Pigma Micron pen, you can pretty much highlight afterwards within seconds and it won't smear your pen. There's bleed, but it's not a bloodbath. Only the wettest inks bled through the page. So the Sharpie Ultrafine pen, my Stabilo .88, the Stettler marker, the Stabilo highlighter, and my ink pad and calligraphy ink bled through. And guess what? These have all been offenders in other journals I've tested. So far, the recycled paper is not looking that much different to other papers. Then you have the mild liners and Tombow dual brush pens showing through when there's multiple layers over the same spot. But this is also something I have seen before. Finally, the fountain pens had spots coming through. But guess what didn't show through? The watercolours. Once you take away the pens that bled through, you don't have much of an issue with ghosting. It's there, but it's very faint and doesn't really interfere with how you use the opposite side of the page. I really feel like it's actually a little bit better than a Leuchtturm 1917 notebook, which has a similar weight paper. So I think we've already worked out that fountain pens aren't a go. Cognitive Surplus say this themselves, that it's just not worth trying fountain pens on this paper. There's just too much feathering and there's bleed through as well. You get spots for nearly every stroke on the other side of the page. Lead pencil erased well, but whiteouts are pretty much a write-off. This is pretty much a cut and paste jobby if you want to cover up mistakes. The recycled paper in this notebook seems to perform pretty similarly to other 80 GSM notebooks I've tried. The main difference is probably the slightly greyish cast to the colour of the paper. If you're happy to write with purpose rather than with a flourish, then give cognitive surplus notebooks a go, and then you get the added benefit of feeling good about the fact that you're increasing demand for recycled paper products, which should eventually increase the range of papers available. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I'm planning to do a comparison video soon for 80 to 90 GSM papers, which will show exactly where this 80 GSM recycled paper from Cognitive Surplus sits amongst other brands like Leuchtturm 1917, Rhodia, Caran d'Ache, and Midori. See ya!